Hi everyone, and welcome to webinar 6 in our data exchange webinar series for the Targeted Early Intervention program. In today's webinar, we're going to talk about creating cases, sessions, and clients for activities in the community strengthening stream. If you haven't already, please make sure you watch webinar number 5 before you continue with this webinar. Webinar 5 lays the groundwork for a lot of the content I'm going to go through today. So please make sure you watch that one before you continue watching this, because a lot more will make sense once you've watched that first. So there are two key things that we're going to discuss in this webinar. I'll take you through a number of different examples of activities in the community strengthening stream, and we'll talk about how to set up your cases and your sessions for those activities. And we'll also talk about when to record individual clients and when it's okay to just record an unidentified group. So as always, in our previous webinars, I introduced everyone to this document, the Data Exchange Quick Start Guide. This is a 5-page document that outlines the 11 key steps you need to follow to access and start using the data exchange. It includes links to all the key resources you need to action each step. And as you can see on the slide, it includes this checklist so you can keep track of where you're up to. So in each of our webinars, I've been taking everyone through each step in this document. We've accessed training materials, we've subscribed to our newsletters, we've created our outlets, and we've looked into our consent and privacy principles. In today's webinar, just like in week 5, we're going to tackle steps 8 and 9, but we're going to focus specifically on the community strengthening stream. So we'll talk about what information you need to collect for activities in that stream, and we'll talk about how to create your cases and sessions for activities in that stream. So to get started, I want to do a quick recap of some of the things we've learned in the previous webinar. So by this stage, you should all know what an outlet is. That is the location a service is delivered in. Outlets are the first thing you need to create before you can start reporting. So if you haven't done that, please watch the previous webinar on creating outlets. Once your outlets are set up, you can then start to create your cases. So cases store information about program activities and outlets. And as you can see in the diagram, they link relevant sessions together, which then link clients together. So they kind of act like a container for a specific activity that you deliver. Once you've created your case, you can then start to create sessions. So sessions are individual episodes of service. So every time you meet with an individual client, a family, or a group, you will create a session to show that you've delivered a specific activity on a specific day to a specific person or group of people. And then the last layer of data entry are our clients. So you can attach individual clients to a case to say these are the people who will be participating in this activity. And then you can also attach clients to specific sessions to show who participated in a particular session on a particular day. And as we discussed last week, you can also record a number of unidentified clients for your case or for your session. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go through some common activities that are conducted in the community strengthening stream, and we'll talk about how to report those activities in the data exchange. So how many cases to create, how many sessions to create, and if you should have individual clients or unidentified clients. So the first example we have is of a community event. So in this example, the outlet is the hub because that's the space the event was held in. Then they have created a case. So the case ID is just NAIDOC event. Again, they've selected the hub as the outlet. They've selected the relevant program activity, community connection, and they've also recorded the number of people they expect will attend the event, which is 50. Then they've just created one session because they just ran one event. So for the session ID, they've put in NAIDOC community event, August 2019. The date is the actual date the event was on. Service type is community engagement because that's what's in their contract for this particular activity. And then they've recorded the number of people who actually attended the event as 42. And that's all they have to do. Community events are probably the easiest activity to record in the data exchange. A few things that might be worth noting though. So if you were to run a community event that spans multiple days, then you should create a session for each day the event is held. That's because when you create the session, you need to put in the date that the activity was conducted on. So you can create a different session for every day to make sure that date is correct. For community events, you do not need to report individual clients. This is because it's not always possible or practical, and sometimes it's not even relevant. So you can just record the number of unidentified clients who attended. You can also use community score to measure an outcome for the event. But don't worry about that. We've got a webinar coming up on that in a couple of weeks' time. Another thing to note is that you can only record a community event in the data exchange if your organization was responsible for organizing it. You cannot record community events just for attending them. So you need to actually have hosted the event and put substantial resources into organizing the event in order to record it. So our next example is also for a community event, but it's for a very large event where you might expect 1,000 people or more to attend. So when you run events with this many people, we unfortunately need to record it a little bit differently in DEX. And this is because the maximum number of unidentified clients you can record in a case is 999. So if you ever need to record a number larger than 999, you need to create a second case. So you can see in the example on the screen, we've got a community event that is held in a city park. We've created two cases because they expect that about 1,200 people will attend the event. So they've just named the first session NAIDOC Event 1, and they've recorded 600 unidentified clients. And then they've named their second case NAIDOC Event 2, and they've also recorded 600 unidentified clients. So they've just split the number evenly across the two cases. And then after the event, they create their sessions, and they've recorded the actual number of people who attended. And again, they just split it across the two cases. Our next example we have is for a mums group. So this mums group is held in a local public library. So they've got an outlet set up for that. They create one case, and they've just set up a session every time the group meets. You could apply this same logic for any sort of group activity where the same group of people is meeting on more than one occasion. So you'll just have a case for your group, and then every time the group meets, you'll have a session to sit underneath that. Now, you might have noticed in this example, we haven't recorded any unidentified clients. That's because we would expect that most clients would be individual clients for activities like this. And that's because you'll most likely be seeing them over a few different sessions. So you should be able to get them to complete an intake form and hopefully even measure outcomes for them. So instead of recording a number of unidentified clients, you can attach individual clients to the case and then to the sessions that people actually attend. So the next example we have is for providing information and advice. So I know that in a lot of organizations, you'll have people just call up over the phone. They might ask for some information about services in their area, or they'll pop into your center and ask for some advice about something. So more often than not, these interactions are very ad hoc and they're quite fleeting as well. So you might only have a 10-minute conversation with someone and then you might never see them again. And in most of those instances, it's not going to be appropriate or even necessary for you to ask those people to complete an intake form or for you to collect personal information from them. So what you can do is you can record those clients as unidentified clients. And this example on the slide shows you how to do just that. So in this example, there is a community center that provides information and advice from their hub. So they've set up one case for information and advice, and then you can see they've created 4 sessions to sit underneath that. So if we look at the session ID for each of those sessions, we can see that they've got a session for July, one for August, one for September, and then the last one is for October. So what they do is over the course of a month, they tally up the number of people they provide information and advice to. And every month they create a session and then they just record that number as the number of unidentified clients. So you can see in July, they provided info and advice to 30 people. In August, it was 26 and so on. If you wanted to, instead of doing this monthly, You could do it on a weekly basis or on a fortnightly basis, whatever you think is going to work for you and for your organization. What you could also do is some of you might have people who come into your community center multiple times a week. There might be people who you speak to on a regular basis, people you assist on a regular basis. So if you wanted to, you could create a client record for them in the data exchange, and then you could attach them to the relevant session as an individual client. You would only do this though if you expect to see them more than once. So if you know you're going to see them again and again. And also you don't have to do that. It's up to you. The next example I have is very similar. So this is for a drop-in center. So say, for example, you've got a room with some computers and a printer that kids use after school. You've got a basketball court. So people will just come into your center and use the facilities as needed. You can record this the same way you would information and advice. So in this example, they've set up one case and they've created 4 sessions, but their sessions have been set up on a weekly basis. So if you look at the session ID, they've written drop in week 1 July, drop in week 2 July, drop in week 3, etc., etc. So every week over the course of a week, they just count the number of people who come in to use a computer or the number of people who use the basketball court, and then they just record that as the number of unidentified clients. And again, if you wanted to, you could attach individual clients to the relevant session. So if there's someone who comes in to use your computers on a daily basis, then you could ask them to complete an intake form, create a client record for them, and attach them to the sessions for the week or for the days that they come into your center. Okay, so our next example is for recording interagencies. So this is exactly the same as any group activity. You just create a case and then you create a session every time the group meets. One of the most common questions we get about recording interagencies is who is the client? So who are you actually counting when you're recording your the number of unidentified clients? So like for any activity that's being recorded in the data exchange, clients are the individual people who receive a service or who participate in an activity. They are not the organizations you provide support to. This is because it's not actually possible to record an organization in the data exchange. If you did that, it would actually mean that you're entering false data, which can severely impact our ability to trust the information that's reported to us. So you must record the number of individual staff members who attend the interagency meeting. So you can record those people as unidentified clients, or if you wanted to, you can attach them as individual clients to the relevant session. It's up to you. And you can have a combination of both individual and unidentified clients as well. If some people want to provide their information and others don't, you can cater to both of those client groups. Another important thing to remember is that you should only record interagencies in the data exchange if your organization is responsible for organizing it or for running it, for hosting it, whatever it may be. So you've contributed substantial resources to this interagency being held. You shouldn't record this activity if you've just attended the meeting because you haven't actually provided somebody with the service. Okay, recording jointly delivered activities. So this is another thing we get lots of questions about. How do you record an activity index if multiple organizations have contributed to providing the service? Unfortunately, there is no one clear answer to this because it really depends on how the organizations work with each other and the type of service they've delivered. But we have some general rules of thumb that you can follow. So if there is a lead organization, they can report the total number of clients, and then any support organizations would just report the number of clients they engage directly. So let's say, for example, there is an organization who hosts a community event, and at the event, there are several other organizations who each run their own stall. So in that example, the lead organization is the one who hosted the event. They're the one who organized the entire thing. And they would record the entire community event in the data exchange because that's what they have delivered. The organizations who each ran a stall would just record the number of people they engaged with directly. So the number of people who came to their stall and who they spoke to about their service. Our second rule of thumb is that if all organizations have contributed equally, all service providers should record the activities they conducted. So, for example, a playgroup is jointly delivered by 2 organizations. They would both report the individual clients who attended and their outcomes. And this is because it's not really possible to split the cohort up in any way that makes sense. At the moment, we are still trying to figure out the best way to report jointly delivered activities in the data exchange. So our advice on this may change depending on what our data looks in 6 months, what our data looks like in 6 months' time. But for the time being, that's just what we're going with. There is one exception to this rule though, and that is for large community events. So anything with more than, say, 100 people. So in these situations, we would actually like you to split the total number of unidentified clients up by the number of organizations who hosted the event. So if 5 organizations jointly deliver an event that has 200 people attend and all the orgs have contributed equally, what we would like them to do is to split the number of unidentified clients up by the number of organizations. And this is because if they all report that 200 people attend the event, it's going to inflate our client numbers dramatically. So it would turn 200 people into 1,000 people, for example. And that's not an accurate representation of how many people we've serviced in the community. Now, I know this isn't the greatest solution. As I said before, we're still trying to figure out what works best, and our advice on reporting jointly delivered activities may change. But for the time being, this is kind of what we're going with. And as more data gets reported into DEX, then we can try to figure out what a more appropriate solution might be. So now I want to spend a little bit of time talking through what cannot be recorded in the data exchange. So last week we talked about who a client is in the data exchange. So you can see the definition on the screen in the blue box. When we record an individual client or an unidentified client in the data exchange, we must adhere to this definition. So a client must be an individual who receives a service as part of a funded activity that is expected to lead to a measurable outcome. So this definition has implications for what we can and can't record in the data exchange. So the first rule is that you cannot record activities that are not funded under the TEI program. A lot of you will have funding from a number of different government departments, federal government departments, state government departments. You'll get funding from different grants that you've applied for. So when you record information in the data exchange under the TEI program activities, you need to make sure you're only recording activities that you've been contracted to deliver for the TEI program. This means some of you will need to speak to your manager or your director to find out which activities you deliver are funded by TEI to make sure you're not recording activities that we don't fund. The next few examples on the slide are website visits or hits, document downloads, newsletters you send out, radio shows, social media posts. Unfortunately, you cannot record this work in the data exchange. This is because you can only record activities in the data exchange if you have provided a service directly to a client, and that interaction could lead to a measurable outcome. So, for example, if you distribute a newsletter or a resource to 200 people via your mailing list, you can't count that activity. And this is because, one, you don't know if the person receiving the email is actually a client. It could, for example, be a DCJ staff member who signed up to your mailing list. It could be an old employee. And the second reason is because you don't know if the people who received that email have genuinely engaged with the content. You may be able to see who has opened the email, but that doesn't mean that they've read the email or other documentation. So I understand that this work is really important, but unfortunately you can't record it in the data exchange. What I would suggest doing, though, is recording it elsewhere. So you can download your Google Analytics or whatever it might be. You might keep track of how many people are signed up to your mailing list, how many people read or like certain social media posts, and you can record all of that information elsewhere and then take that to your contract manager when it's time to talk about your contract and the activities that you've delivered. You can record other online activities though. So when you deliver a service online and clients are directly engaged, you can record those activities. So for example, if you provide counseling sessions over the phone or via video conferencing software, or if you run a playgroup online, or you run online workshops or information sessions, whatever it may be, you can still record all of those activities because you are directly engaging with a client or with a group of clients. So there is a document on the DSS website that is called Recording Alternate Forms of Service Delivery. You can see the hyperlink on the slide. Please download that document and have a read. It includes lots of different examples of when you can and can't record online activities, and it provides a really strong rationale for why we shouldn't be recording social media posts or newsletters and things like that. So you might find it really useful to help you figure out what's relevant to your organization and what you can and can't be putting into DEX. Before we wrap up, I just want to show everyone this table quickly. So I introduced this to everyone last week, and it shows what proportion of your clients should be individual clients, and therefore what proportion can also be unidentified clients. So as a general rule of thumb, you should use the information in this table to help you determine if your client should be recorded as an unidentified group or if they should be individual clients. So as you can see, the proportion of individual clients that we expect varies depending on the program activities you deliver. So for community connections, only about 25% of your clients need to be individual clients. This is because the type of work that's typically conducted in that program activity is most likely to be with large groups of people where it's not possible to get everyone to complete an intake form, for example. And then for community centers and community support, it goes up to 50%. So we expect a little bit more of your clients to be individual clients for those program activities. Please note that this is just a guide. So we understand that there are many situations where it may not be possible to meet those percentages. And there might be some situations where you might have a lot more of your clients as individual clients as well. And that's more than okay too. So here are all of the resources that I mentioned today. So on the left-hand side of the screen are 3 documents that have been developed by DCJ. So the TEI Data Collection and Reporting Guide is a really useful document to help wrap your head around how many individual clients or unidentified clients you should have. The second document about how to set up your cases, sessions, and clients goes through a lot more examples than I went through today of how to set up your cases and your sessions. If you get stuck trying to figure out how many you should have or how many individual clients you should have, for example, please download that document because it provides some really useful examples and information to help you work your way through that. Same goes for the next document as well about what information to record. That includes, I think there's almost 20 different examples in there of different activities that you can use as a guide to help you figure out what to do for your service. And then when it comes to actually using the data exchange platform, there's some task cards and e-modules on the right-hand side of the screen to help you navigate that platform. And then as always, here are all of the places you can go for help if needed. Please don't hesitate to email tei@facs.newsouthwales.gov.au if you need any help figuring any of this out. We are more than happy to sit down with everyone to figure out how many cases and sessions they should have for their work. Thanks so much, everyone. I'll see you in the next webinar.